Searching the Scriptures with Watchman Alexander, Episode 5.
Is everybody in the world going to die before someone finds the answer?
Do I have to remind you that theory is the beginning of solution?
What are we up against? Is it a dangerous thing?
All I've ever known to be true is a lie.
I didn't say it would be easy. I just said it would be the truth. I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Welcome to Searching the Scriptures with Watchman Alexander, where we break away from religious systems and man-made dogma to learn the Word of God from an independent Hebraic perspective. And now your host, the prophecy buff who tackles the tough stuff, Alexander Lawrence.
Hello and shalom. The hour is late, the time is short, and the storm is coming. So this is your opportunity to do a systems check. I'm here to wake up the sleeping servants of Yahweh God and equip them for the last days. I do that by teaching discernment, poring over prophecies, treating the infection of Mystery Babylon in the church, and giving you courage. My book is Leviathan's Ruse, the comprehensive guide to the battle between good and evil, and my website is watchmanalexander.com. I have two guests on for tonight's show, Tom Dunn and Jared Chrestman. They're the makers of a recently released documentary film called Detestable. Detestable is about the victims of satanic ritual abuse. It's about people whose lives have been dramatically changed through trauma brought on by ritual activity. Yes, this really is happening, and in increasing amounts. It's something that we, as the Assembly of Messiah, need to be aware of and need to be fighting against. We are really the only defense against this kind of behavior. Our prayers and petitions and our vigilance in keeping an eye out for victims is what's going to make a difference in this whole area. So that being said, tonight's show is obviously not for kids. You do not want to let young family members listen to this. In fact, the adults who are listening should probably get themselves prepared emotionally and say a prayer and get into the right place spiritually before you listen to this, because it is difficult. If it's not something that you've encountered before, especially, it's going to be hard to hear. I think it's something that we need to hear, but it's not an easy pill to swallow. I do have to apologize for the sound quality on tonight's show. So when I recorded this, I was trying out a new piece of software, some free software that would work with Skype to record the interview. And unfortunately, I found out why it was free, because it did not work very well. I did a test before the show, and the results of the test sounded okay, so I went ahead and did the whole interview. But then, listening to it afterwards, I realized there was an echo every time one of my guests spoke. Plus, the sound quality in general just isn't that great. So I apologize, but I hope you'll still listen to the interview anyway. It's very eye-opening. So without further ado, here we go. To get started, I'm just going to read you a little bit off of the back of the DVD case for this film. It says, for over 35 years, individuals have been coming forward with stories that are so horrifying that most people find them hard to believe. These accounts detail traumatic memories of satanic rituals that involve human sacrifice, sexual abuse, and mind control techniques. Even though the reports have been dismissed as nothing more than panic and myth, the victims refuse to go away. As witnesses continue to emerge, the reality of an underground power of lawlessness becomes difficult to conceal. Detestable takes you on a journey from ritual abuse to redemption, from the book of Ezekiel to the present day, exposing a dark secret that will no longer be ignored. With courage and boldness, the survivors relive their nightmares and give hope to all who are suffering. Sounds very interesting, and I've watched it, and it is, in fact, incredibly intriguing. There's a lot of tough stuff in there, but like I said, I think it's stuff that we need to talk about, that God would have us to tackle. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for being on tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, yeah, thank you, Alex. We appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. So the way that I got connected with you guys is that I was at the Hear the Watchman conference in Dallas, and Jared approached me and we just got to talking about some things, and he also handed me a copy of his documentary. So of course I went home and I watched it as soon as I had the opportunity, and I was very impressed by the mission that you're on here, by what you're trying to do, because there are very few people who are willing to attack these kinds of issues, because even in the Christian world where we believe in Satan, for the most part, the Bible-believing Christians would acknowledge that there is a Satan. To believe that it goes all the way into the abuse and the incredible kinds of stories that we have in this documentary that would just make anybody sick to their stomach is really hard for a lot of people, even Bible-believing Christians, to deal with. So I'm proud of you guys for tackling this, and I have to wonder, what your motivations were, because I know this wasn't about making money. I know this was born out of a desire to help people. So what were your motivations?
Go ahead, Tom, you start.
Well, as you're explaining that, I think that Jared and I really take it for granted exactly what we did, and that's not to puff us up in any way, but because we have been kind of thrust in to this life where we're dealing with these people and these survivors, and we're trying to help them, and we're trying to understand them, and we're trying to investigate. It's a lot easier for us than it is the average person, and I think we take for granted how scary it is for a lot of people, including believers. Our motivation is exposure, edifying the church, seeing people set free, seeing people saved, and those two things are the biggest things, and many more. But I guess I just got so many things in my heart, and the idea behind the film was to present this to the church in a way that they could believe it, that they could say, okay, this is a reality. This is something that I understand happens, which I think if you ask just your average, Christian that sits in a pew, on a Sunday morning, they would agree, yeah, there's stuff out there that happens, but I don't think they understand how big the network is, how sophisticated it is, how widespread it is, and even some of the details of the horrible things they do. So, I mean, that was one of the main motivators, to give survivors hope, definitely, and to kind of light a fire under the Christians and say, hey, this is something that we should not be afraid of. We need to go after this in one way or another, whether it's through prayer, whether it's boots on the ground, whether it's supporting somebody else who's actually going after this, because this is real and it's sophisticated, and we need to be prepared because it's not going away.
Yeah, and it's funny you asked that, Alexander, because most of the time people ask us the backstory around the movie, and they don't necessarily. I don't know if I've ever thought about like our motivation necessarily, especially on like a podcast, any of the other podcasts we've done. But I guess an interesting point that comes to mind was all of the conversations that Tom and I had in the process of making the movie. Anybody that studies satanic ritual abuse understands it's a dark subject. And so being the fact that we were making the movie primarily for Christian people to introduce, regular church folks to the topic of satanic ritual abuse, that it was important for us to do it in a way that it would be received well. And I don't necessarily know that we achieved that. We had lots of conversations about how dark should this film be, because this is a dark subject. And what's interesting is, when Tom was talking about us taking it for granted, I think we absolutely have, because when we got done with the film, we're like, wow, this wasn't even half as dark as we could have made it. We really tried to make this subject as least dark as possible so that people could understand just what was this was an introduction to this subject. That's all this was an introduction to the idea and the material and the stories, some basic stories. that's, thousands, tens of thousands of people share similar stories to the ones you're going to hear in the film. And when we were done with the film, we said, I think we did a really good job at not sensationalizing this topic, presenting it in a Christ-like manner in truth, but not just making it dark for the sake of making it dark.
And you still overwhelm people.
It still overwhelmed people, and that's, I think, one of the things that we took for granted because, here we sat back and we're like, we did a good job. No one's going to be freaked out by this. This is cookie-cutter stuff in this field. And instead, it was still just the basics were completely overwhelming. And I feel like, to Tom and I, that's probably been the most interesting thing. We've had an overwhelmingly positive response to the film. We have had very few criticisms. But I will tell you, the only criticism Tom and I have taken, and we take it very well, we love constructive criticism, has been the only people that don't praise the film are the people that weren't able to finish it. And that is something that we see very often at this point, is somebody that has watched the film says to a friend or another family member or something, you gotta watch this film. This film is just, this is crazy. You gotta see what these people are talking about, what they did, what they went through. They pass the film along, they get the film back, they say, what'd you think? The people, the friends or family will say, well, we didn't finish it. We only made it 30 minutes. We couldn't do it. And so it's either you watch it and you get it, or you can't take it and you can't make it more than 30 minutes through the movie. And that has been interesting for us.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't really want to look to the dark side of the world that they're living in. They just want to avoid it as much as possible. And those people might even watch the nightly news and might even read newspapers and see or get exposure to a lot of the terrible stuff that's going on, but they're detached from it. And really, we get used to a lot of the war and the crime and stuff from a journalistic perspective. But when you start to see interviews with actual people who have been through these incredibly traumatic events, and you feel their emotion, and you hear about in detail about the things that happened, that makes it real. That brings it home in a whole new way. And so it's very difficult to deal with if you're not already prepared in the spirit to know just to know how bad the enemy really is and how far he takes things if he has the opportunity, but then also to know how much God hates it and how much God wants to stop that sort of thing from happening, if only his people who are here in the world, who are his hands and feet, would go about doing that. And so that's why I think it's so important you've brought this to us.
Well, you make a good point in that when you talk about hearing the stories from the victims in the film. And I think that when Tom and I finally decided to make the movie, which Tom was the reason the movie got going. Tom had already decided to make the movie when he asked me if I wanted to produce it. Tom and I were good friends at this point, and we'd been helping each other on different cases and so on and so forth. So Tom and I had a lot in common already, and Tom and I both thought making a movie on this topic would be a great idea. Well, Tom got confirmation and things started rolling on his end. He's the director of the film. He had the vision. I was just supportive, One of those things that one of the reasons why we went ahead and did the movie, though, on top of all of that, which we haven't really talked about, is Tom and I have both done a lot of public speaking. And a lot of times when you hear stories of satanic ritual abuse, it comes from a minister or an investigator or a law enforcement professional. They tell stories of satanic ritual abuse, but the stories are always detached from reality in that they're coming from a secondhand source. You're the middleman. There's no emotion in it. You're talking about the facts of a case, and people can say, oh, that sounds crazy. But Tom and I, having done lots of public speaking and spoken on these issues many, many times in front of people, decided let's just, the stories of these victims deserves to be told. They have suffered unimaginable atrocities. Their lives have been full of tragedy. All of them still have not completely, none of them will completely heal from the emotional scars that were created by the events described in the film. And we said their stories deserve to be told. They deserve a platform to be able to talk about this, right? Where people are not ridiculing them or telling them that they have concocted these memories. And so putting them in front of a camera, and they were brave. I mean, brave. Kim was brave. Guy was brave. Claudia was brave. Everybody in the film that gave a testimony. Brian was brave. They were able to convey these stories in a way that only they could because they lived them. And so when you watch these stories, you're not just getting the facts of something that happened. You're getting the raw emotion that still lingers as a result of having suffered these things. And that seems to be the difference between this movie and any other documentary that has been done on the subject, is that somehow God blessed us with being able to capture raw emotion attached to these events that hits home in a very different way.
So, from what I've understood over the past couple of years, because I've gotten a lot more education in abuse in general in the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years, I've realized just how widespread abuse against children is in the developed world. I mean, probably everywhere, but what I know about is in kind of the Western world. And there are people in my family who have had this kind of, sexual abuse or emotional abuse, sometimes physical abuse happen to them. There are people in the churches that I've gone to, men and women, who were sexually abused as children. And it's a big, big problem. I didn't realize how frequent it is and how frequently it comes from the families themselves, not from outsiders. Although outsiders can be a problem too, definitely, but usually it's from family members, unfortunately. Well, the church has kind of got a finger on that to some degree. I mean, there's more awareness of it, but specifically when it comes to abuse that was motivated by ritual means or ritual purposes, that's a little bit of a smaller slice of the pie. But why is that still important? Why should we understand that? And how do we treat that differently from the regular and somewhat more common forms of sexual abuse that are motivated just by selfishness?
Well,
go ahead, Tom.
When we're talking about SRA, we call it SRA, Satanic Ritual Abuse, okay? This is abuse that occurs in the context of a ritual, okay, in a ritual setting. Many of us, if we've seen any kind of horror movie, especially in the last 5 years, and maybe a lot of people haven't, but they have scenes in there that are ritual scenes that involve satanic cults, you know. I'm thinking of a movie I saw when I was a little kid with Vincent Price. It was called The Fall of the House of Usher. And they had your stereotypical Satanist in the movie wearing robes, you know, doing rituals. I saw that when I was probably, I don't know, right around 10 years old. It scared me to death. So at that point in my life. But anyway, we're talking about sexual abuse, physical abuse, in the setting of a ritual where people are worshiping the devil, where they're calling on demonic presence, and the actual abuse is like, I mean, it's bringing worship to Satan. This is what he thrives on. This is what he loves. Okay, when we study, you know, God's word, we look and we can see human sacrifice. We can see bloodshed. We can see when Elijah went up against on Mount Carmel, and he was going up against the prophets of Baal. Is that right? Am I messing this up? I'm just like,
no, I think you're right.
Yeah, I think I'm going blank there for a second. But what were they doing? They were cutting themselves. They were bloodletting. Okay, this was all to empower the demonic. So. And I'm kind of going to a bunch of different places here, but sexual abuse is horrible in any circumstance. And I mean, it's a nightmare. And you're right. There's no family that's not touched by this. It's crazy how widespread it is, you know, and I can look at my family and know of instances in our history where this has taken place, you know, generations ago. stories that have been told to me. So it's all bad, but what makes this different, and this happens sometimes when in just sexual abuse that doesn't take place in a ritual setting, is there is a split in the psyche where there's only so much that our mind can take with the abuse, with the torture, with the physical pain, and it causes our personality to split off into different personalities. The first film that was ever made about this was Sybil. I saw this again when I was about 12 years old and began to learn about this. So, and from extreme abuse, it's almost like a self-defense mechanism that our body has to help us cope with this torture. And when this happens to a child 5 years old or younger, it opens up doors for these cultists, for whoever is applying this abuse, to be able to program these personalities to do certain tasks, whether it would be spy programming, priest programming, whether it would be sometimes they're programmed to go into churches, to infiltrate churches, to be sex slaves. I could go on and on and on about the different things that they do. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I just kind of took it and went there in a bunch of different directions.
No, that's good stuff. Jared, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, one of the reasons why I think that when we're looking at the cases of abuse as a whole, right, and we separate the idea of satanic ritual abuse from opportunistic crimes that end with just sexual molestation or something. One of the reasons why I think it's important to understand that satanic ritual abuse exists is because oftentimes cases of sexual abuse get misdiagnosed as just sexual abuse when in reality there was a satanic ritual component. So in our opinion, even though satanic ritual abuse might be a smaller slice of the pie in the world of abuse in total, it's still a lot bigger than most people really have any comprehension of, and it's growing. And so for people to be ignorant that these things are taking place, they're going to miss the signs of it actually happening when they find a case of abuse. And one of the reasons why this is important is because whereas somebody can be molested or, abused in some shape, form, or fashion, just simply as an opportunistic thing of a predator being present and engaging in such a fashion. The problem is that when you have the satanic thing working behind the scenes, let me back up. With the satanic component, it's never going to stop. You have a coven that's doing it on purpose, is my point. And so if with regular abuse, sometimes it can go on for years, sometimes it can happen once and it's over with. But if there's a ritual component to it, then you know that there's something going on where it's never going to stop until you put an end to that coven or you bring exposure to it in some form or fashion. So when you're able to identify the ritual components of the abuse, you're able to target the people that are involved, and that's where you can do a lot of damage in putting an end to it long term. If that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense there.
Yes, it does. It does. What about the victims in your film? How did you find them, and how did you know that they were abused in these ways?
A couple different ways. When I made the announcement that I was going to make the film, I just kind of put out there, if anybody's interested in being involved in this project, if you have a story, we'd like to hear it. So we kind of hesitated to do that, but we went ahead and did it anyway because we thought that would help us bring some people out that would want to tell their story, and it did. And that's how we got in contact with Kim. Now, a lot of people contacted me that did not want to tell their story on film, but they wanted me to tell their story, which was fine. But finding people that are able to do this, that are not afraid of any backlash, that's difficult. So, and then also you could be setting yourself up for somebody coming in to infiltrate you or coming in to manipulate you in some way. So when we got in touch with Kim, for example, we vetted it out. We talked to her. We prayed about it. We interviewed her over the phone. Jared and I did a 3-way conversation with her, and we just got her to tell us, her story, and we were just like, okay, this is legit, and we want to have her in the film. We prayed about it. We didn't get any reservations, and we went ahead and did it. Now, Guy, who's in the film also, he came from Oregon all the way to Ohio seeking deliverance. And when he did that, he told me his story, and I was like, wow, I want to put you in the film. He said he would do it. And I said, well, I'm going to come out there to where this stuff happened. I want you to take me, back to the places. And he did, and that's how we found him. So I'll give you another example. Debbie, who was in the film, she found out that I was making the film, and she said, I'm so glad you're making this film. I know this stuff is real. This is what I've been through. And she wasn't an actual victim, but she and her husband became a pastor of this church in this small Ohio town. And it was a very powerful church, powerful in the Lord, and people were getting saved, and it was causing problems for the Satanic cult that was running this town. So they sent infiltrators into the church to try and stop the church, make the pastor fall. This happens a lot. So, and the power of God was so strong in this church, it broke down the programming of the infiltrator. So, and that was her story. But when she told me, she said, I'm so glad you're doing this this movie. This is real. And I said, tell me your story. And when she did, I said, hey, would you be in the film because you are so credible and you're the kind of witness that I would like. Somebody, she's just a normal pastor's wife who's minding her own business and didn't really take into consideration even the possibility of a satanic cult, coming against her and her husband. And she woke up real quick to what was going on.
Yeah, I guess she did. Oh, so were you flying out to see the victims or doing interstate trips to get to them for the most part?
Yeah, for the most part, I went to them wherever they were. I can't think of anybody that really came to me. Yeah, I mean, I flew out to Canada, I flew out to California to meet Greg, and then to Oregon to meet Guy. We went up to Alberta, Canada, and they, Kim and her husband picked me up there. And the other place I went to was Kentucky and in Ohio. So filmed some of the stuff in Texas also.
Where did the funds come from to do that?
I did a fundraiser just through my Facebook page. I made a film and I did a really soft push. I said, hey, if you're interested in supporting this is what I'm going to do. That was one of the scariest parts. I was like, I told the Lord, I said, I don't have any money to do this, Lord. I don't. And I said, if you want this to happen, you're going to have to supply it. And he said, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of it, And he didn't say it like that, but, he just gave me a piece about it. And I was like, okay. And, I went and told my wife, I was like, okay, this is going to sound crazy. We don't have money to do this, but this is what the Lord told me. And she said, okay, I support you, I guess, And she was nervous about it, but I'm telling you what, every dime that we needed came in, and we made it on a very modest budget of less than $8,000, which is super cheap. And I really like the style of the way I did this. I could have, we could have doubled or tripled the budget and made, fix a lot of things in the film, especially, the production quality. But personally, it was just kind of like guerrilla filmmaking. I got a camera that I could fit in my backpack, and I, hopped on a plane and took off. And I just shot it. I shot everything myself. And some people ask, why did you shoot it straight on? I said, because I didn't have a cameraman. And I needed to be able to look in that camera and make sure the camera's working. Because if I don't get it, then I lose the film. So they were like, that's not a good way to shoot the film. Well, I did it that way, because that's the only way I could do it. And then I would set up another camera on a tripod and, set that up and record that. But the thing is, it's so confronting looking straight into the person's eyes, looking right into the camera. They're looking at me right behind the camera. So I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. So.
Yeah. And it was the content that was important. Obviously it helps if you have good production quality so that people aren't even really thinking about the visuals or the feel of the editing or whatever it may be, but you still did it and it was fine. I mean, yeah, you could, like you said, you could have had a bigger budget that would have allowed you to do a lot more stuff with the visuals and the music and the editing. But what needed to be said was said. What you needed to capture, you captured. So I was grateful to have the information.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about how you felt during the filmmaking. Did you guys, during the production or the actual filming, experience any sort of spiritual warfare? I take that as a yes.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's yeah. I mean, but we're not new to this game. We didn't. Tom's a lot more seasoned than just the average person that works in deliverance, and we've seen people get crushed in this ministry. We've seen people die in this ministry. We've seen a lot. We knew what we were getting into, but at the same time, we knew we were supposed to do it, right? And that's the difference between some people that get crushed in this ministry and some people that don't. Some people get involved because they think it's cool to get involved in chasing demons and chasing ritual abuse and covens, and there's a romantic element to that they enjoy pursuing. Tom and I, we weren't called to do this. We honestly don't want to do this to this day. Like, we don't want any part of this ministry, but we're called to do it. And in that, there's a certain protection. You're just being obedient, right? And so we know when God put us to go out there and do this, let me put it this way. Spiritually, we consider ourselves fighters in the deliverance game. And I personally get really tired of cookie-cutter church stuff where people are always screaming about the devil attacking them. All right, it's warfare. If you're in battle, you're supposed to be attacked. If you were in a fight, nobody was attacking you. It's not a fight. I get tired of people always screaming and yelling because they're getting hit. When you step into a boxing ring, you are going to get hit. There's no way around that. Tom and I knew going into this movie that we're going into a fight. We knew that we weren't going to come out unscathed, but God told us it was going to be good. We really ramped up fasting. I mean, fasting was a big part of the behind the scenes in this movie. We got phone calls from people that have some high level sources. Even on a low budget doing this film, we were actually tripping some web strings of the spider's web all the way in Hollywood. We had upset some big people by going after some of the stuff we did, because some of this took place in California, where some of these rituals happened. There were connections to many people that were much higher up in old school. And we don't have a lot of time to go into all of that. But what I'm just saying is we caught the attention of people that are capable of fighting at an elite level. And yeah, we had some serious spiritual warfare, but we also had some serious covering. And some of that, still not over. There's still elements of this film that are piquing interest, and we're still getting residual from that. But it is what it is. It's a fight. This is what we do, and God protects us. And as long as we stay prayed up and try to keep, live a righteous lifestyle and practice, staying away from simple activity, eliminating as many doors as possible, and staying tuned into the Holy Spirit. He's equipped us with everything that we need to be successful, and it's a journey that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Yeah, I would just echo everything that Jared said. When I started making the film, even before I announced it publicly, I contacted several prayer warrior friends and just asked them to start praying, and they continued praying for me throughout the making of the whole film. And I was very, I kept my cards real close to the chest. I did not let a lot of people know what I was doing. And I wanted to give updates about the film because things were going really good, but I didn't want the enemy to see what was going on. So I, especially during the editing process, I kept things real quiet and didn't want, anyone to know, how I was doing. I had a good friend who really supported me, and he said, "I'm going to fast for you every Wednesday for this film," and just encouraged me, supported me. And when I left for Oregon, I didn't know it, but he died that morning in his basement. He lay down there for 4 days. Nobody knew he was dead. And I didn't find out till the day after I got back. And, I'm not saying that, this happened, had anything to do with my film, but this guy was in warfare, for me. I mean, he was up there in age, but it was still kind of a shock. But what I'm saying is that moment was difficult for me because here was this guy that was supporting me. He was fasting for me, and, he passed away. So, I mean, the toughest part for me, spiritual warfare-wise, was in the editing process. And I knew that I would finish it. I would go all the way to the end. I knew that I would be protected. I knew no harm would come to me. I had that confidence going all the way through because God told me, and those of us, those people that understand what I'm saying, they know what I mean. He told me everything's going to be okay. You're going to complete this, which was a crazy thing for me because I don't finish a lot of things I start personally. And I know this was the Lord because we went all the way to the end and we did it. And all glory to Him, all praise to Him.
In 10 months, by the way. I mean, from start to finish, everything in 10 months.
We had to do it quick because I didn't want to leave this hanging out there, okay? Because it would not have gotten finished, I don't think, if we didn't set a quick goal and just get this done. And I mean, I could have, when I was editing it, there's a lot of things I could have did. I could have taken another 2 months to edit it and just tighten things up, but I felt like it was so important, spiritual warfare wise, to get the film done and just get it sent out for duplication, that I just couldn't wait any longer. I mean, like I said, I could have fixed it up and did a ton of things, but it was just, it had to get out there.
Yeah. Bless God. He gives us exactly the fire inside and the resources that we need to get done what He's called us to do.
Yeah, I mean, you went through that with your book. I mean, I'm interested in, Alexander, what you went through writing the book. Did you encounter spiritual warfare?
A little. Actually, that's an interesting question. Looking back on it, because it took so long, it was over such a long period of time that it would be hard for me to say.
How long did it take you to write that book?
A couple of years, including the research.
Interesting. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of your book. I mean, that's why I came up to you. It was because Hear the Watchman, I didn't recognize you, never seen your face, but I had heard your interview on Josh Hawley, and I remember writing down the name of your book. I was like, man, that sounds like an interesting book, and I didn't completely understand what it was about. And it had probably been months and months as I listened to the interview when I showed up at Hear the Watchman. But I walked by and I saw that book, and that entire weekend, I was like, I gotta buy that book because I remember I was really interested in it. I couldn't remember 100% why I was interested in it, but I was just interested in it. And when books stand out to me, I have to buy them. And so I bought your book, and I really enjoyed your book a lot. And I was just kind of wondering myself about, anytime a person engages in producing something, whether it be a movie or a book, there's a lot of work that goes into it. But that's something I've been curious about is on the backside, not only doing the research, but going through, maybe even now as the book grows. I've just wondered if you've encountered any spiritual warfare, being that you're exposing certain occult themes and other issues that you raise in your book that they directly relate to the things that we're doing, whereas you don't talk specifically about them. There are many things in your book that are related to what we run into on a regular basis.
Yeah, it would have been a good idea to keep a journal. Maybe next time I'll do that. of how I'm feeling and, what's going on as I'm writing, because there may indeed have been some stuff happening that I didn't really realize. There were a couple of major bumps in the road during that time. God got us through them, but we were just trying to be as prayerful and submitted as possible during that whole thing. So there's no telling what. Actually, I was just telling my congregation yesterday that God had told my wife during one of her prayer times that she had no idea how much he had saved me from. And I don't know what time period he was talking about, because he didn't specify that to her, whether that was, my whole life or just since she and I have been together or what. But that was interesting to hear that, I've been protected from a lot of things that I don't even know about. So maybe, yeah, he had my back during the whole writing process.
Dude, that's a prayer a prayer of praise that I pray on many occasions, because the same thing here. Anytime you're involved in this ministry in whatever shape, I thank God all the time for taking care of problems before I ever even knew they were possible. And so, even the ones that we encounter, I have to ask myself, how many would have been worse had God not intervened? If God intervened in these problems and this warfare without our knowing it, well, there's no way to thank him for it. And I know that he's done that, though. I know I have not had to suffer certain things, and Thomas had not had to suffer certain things because of God's sovereign hand behind the scenes. And that's a prayer I pray often. Thank you for taking care of problems before I ever even knew they were possible. And that's amazing. I believe that.
Yeah. I want to add a couple of things real quick. One is, and I think Jared would agree with this, most of the warfare has happened after the release of the movie. And I think one of the reasons for that is we lost a lot of our cover. We had a lot of cover of people praying for us when we were making the movie, but when it was over, when it was out, I think that urgency went away, and we were vulnerable more for backlash. I let my guard down too, So, and that happens a lot. And I just mentioned that just as a teaching moment for anybody listening. Don't let your guard down. Don't let any doors open. Early on in making the film, I had there was a night where I was taking my youngest son to a Christian concert in Columbus, and I had bought the tickets months before I even knew I was going to make the movie. And I went down there. I was real bugged that night. I didn't even want to go. I was just like, man, I gotta put on a face here, because I don't want my son not to have a good time at this concert. It's actually a Toby Mac concert, okay? So, and I went down there. I was so bugged. I just had the movie in the back of my mind. I'm like, I was just weighted down by this burden and just thinking about just all the different things and what we were up against. And I'm not kidding you. Man, it seemed like every time they talked, they were talking directly to me. Every single person, on that stage, the different performers, whether it was Toby Mac or whoever else was playing that night, it seemed like they were speaking directly to me and telling me it was like a concert that was designed to encourage somebody that was making a movie about satanic ritual abuse. And I was just blown away. It's just like every single thing they said was directed right at me about exactly what I was doing at that moment. And I don't think I've ever told that story before, but it's just neat how that works out.
Isn't that awesome? The other day, and this is just after losing employment and trying to figure out what we were going to do next. And, a little bit of the panic mode there of, okay, hang on, how much money do we have to survive? How long is this going to last us and all that? And I took a day off to have like a little spiritual retreat. And that morning I went out for a walk, put the headphones in and turned on some praise music, just on the, radio. And the first 5 or 6 songs at least were exactly what I needed to hear. I mean, it was like God had just picked those particular songs because the lyrics were just amazing to give me courage and to help me know that he was going to take care of me. And, we just needed to do what he wanted us to do. And it just spoke directly to me. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
The reason earlier that I mentioned or asked about how much it costs to go film the interviews is because I figured it probably came out of your pocket, or you did a small fundraiser, had a little bit of help from it, but it probably wasn't any sort of a one large donor or patron. But think about if more people in the church become aware of this topic and are willing to help out with it, those who have resources will be able to provide more money so that we can do this kind of thing more, so that people who are filmmakers like yourselves can get together the kind of crew that they need and the equipment that they need to be able to make documentaries or go on exposés, get into places they otherwise wouldn't be able to because they have the right resources. Unless we get the word out, there's not going to be enough people in the assembly of God that are going to know. I don't mean the denomination, by the way, just the assembly of the Lord, that are going to know that they have an opportunity to bless this. And also people who don't have that kind of resource can be praying. Like you said, we need the covering. So the more that we get this out there, the more people know that they have the opportunity to join in the mission by providing prayer cover, which, like you said, is so important.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the reasons. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was just going to mention that it was less than 45 people that funded this movie, which is amazing. Less than 45 people that donated. And I thought, wow, we know so many more people now, just because the film's out now. And we've had a lot more people buy the movie, but 45 people donated to make the movie happen. So I'm thinking, wow, if we ever do something again, I think we would have a lot more support now because we're a lot more well known. And I don't know when that's going to happen. It's going to have to be directed by the Lord, but
yeah, we're not
exactly. I mean, yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. No doubt.
Well, Alexander, that's one of the reasons why we went ahead and started a YouTube channel. Shameless plug here, because one of the things that we've encountered is, we did the movie, but we were going on lots of different radio shows and podcasts and things like that, doing interviews about it, and then eventually those doing the circuit, it dries up, and you sell what you sell, and a certain amount of people get interested, and then that's it. And unless there's a continuous platform, for this, then it's a subject that we don't want to die out. We don't want awareness of this to die out. We don't want the film to fade. And so what Tom and I did was we went ahead and started a YouTube channel called Through the Black, where we do live stream shows several times a week, where we discuss spiritual warfare topics, but we also sometimes bring on other survivors to talk about things that they encountered. We bring on other guests where we talk about similar topics. Really, we can talk about whatever we want. But what it's done is created a platform for anything that we want to do Detestable related that's continuous and ongoing and free for everybody. And so the content that we made available in the film that's for sale, to help support all this other stuff that we're doing, we also wanted to bring content for free to people, that can't afford to watch it. And that's one of the things that we do with our YouTube channel. And so here recently, we just created a website called throughtheblack.com. It's become our central hub. We still have detestablefilm.com, but throughtheblack.com has become our central website because of our growing YouTube channel. And people can subscribe, watch our videos. They can go to throughtheblack.com. They can find a merchandise tab to a line of spiritual warfare t-shirts that we created recently that are available on Amazon. There are links to the film where you can purchase it on Vimeo, or you can order a hard copy. It ships out of Ohio. We've just tried to do as much as we can in the last year to create a platform where people can come and get information about these topics, so we can continue to spread awareness and build a platform that's self-sustainable that'll help fund future projects. And so far, God really seems to be blessing that. And we're encouraged with where it's heading and what God's being able to do with it already.
I'm going to have to charge you for that plug. We'll talk about the fee after the show. No, I'm just kidding, man. That was good.
Put it on Jared's tab, will you?
Oh, I will. I actually went and did an interview on Through the Black not too long ago which was a lot of fun. It was really good. And it's a cool name. I like the name of your channel there and your new website, Through the Black. It has a definite ring to it. So back to the video. Something that I would have liked to see, I guess this is going to be a little bit of constructive criticism. I hope you guys will take it the right way. As I was watching, I found myself wondering, how do I know that these people genuinely experienced the things that they experienced? Now, there were some of them that you could kind of feel, or at least I could feel in the spirit, this person is really reliving this. This person has this emotion because they've actually gone through it. But I couldn't vet through the spirit everybody that was watching. And I thought, there are people who are just off kilter, who will come up with all kinds of things. And some people will believe that they've experienced things that they haven't because they have mental problems. And some people just want attention and so on and so forth. So how do I know that these are true accounts? And so if you do something like this again, I would kind of like to see a little bit more journalistic approach where you go after some other people in their families, in the community. You talk to the cops about, what kind of cases they had around the time that the people were supposedly being victimized, and just get it from multiple angles so that we have more witnesses, we have corroborating evidence and all of that. Is that something you guys might be willing to do on future projects?
I think that's a good comment. And again, there was so many things that I would have liked to do to it. And I had to make a decision at some point, stylistically, how the film was going to play out. And everything that we did, it was a conscious decision, for just putting it out kind of raw the way we did. I mean, there was a lot of things visually that I wanted to do, just to kind of give it that visual edge, you know what I'm saying, that I didn't do. And, as far as like investigation, like the police officer and stuff like that, when I was in Oregon with Guy, we tried to track down the police officer that was mentioned in that story, and we couldn't track him down that day. So, but I guess, I think what you're saying is really good, and it's definitely something, that we are always considering it, and we appreciate any kind of criticism, constructive criticism that we get, and we've been taking, any kind of feedback. But one of the things, we got so many compliments on this film, and one of the things a lot of people were saying was the credibility of the witnesses was so high, they could just tell that these guys are telling the truth. And matter of fact, I think one of the best compliments came from Jared's brother, and he was saying that he was really surprised that the people giving the testimonies weren't crazy. And I might be messing that up, but I was really blown away by what he said. There was just a lot of people saying they felt that the survivors and the witnesses were very credible. But no, I appreciate that, and I think more time. If we would have had more time, we could have done a lot more stuff. One of the things, I think one of the most amazing things about this movie is I worked a full-time job, 40 to 50 hours a week sometimes, and when I was making the movie. So yeah, I would go out on the weekends, and then I would fly out on the weekends, go film, and come back, sometimes late on a Sunday night, and show up to work on Sunday morning. And I'm not making excuses, and then the editing was even harder because I would work all day, go home, go on a run, come back, and then just edit it all night long. And it's like, wow, there's got to be a break in here somewhere.
I agree that the credibility of the witnesses or victims, was very high, even though there weren't a lot of other sources that you were able to bring in. A lot of them did seem extremely genuine, and that kept me wanting to watch the next one and the next one. And yeah, you could feel it. You could feel a lot of those folks were really authentically victimized.
Well, and let me add this. I actually agree with you, Alexander. It was a topic of conversation Tom and I had many times. We even had an idea. We ended up taking 40 hours of footage. We compressed it into just over 2 hours. And so, the closest thing I can think of that would pertain to what you're talking about would be like that new documentary, The Keepers, where 7 episodes, each about an hour long. They explored one story and they exhausted every angle on each story. And Tom and I had talked about taking one story and doing that, but for whatever reason, it didn't seem to be what God was wanting to do with the contacts we were making and the way that it was lining up. And what we ended up deciding was any skeptics in our time in this ministry, we had found that no matter how much evidence you have, journalistic integrity, evidence, things that you put forward, you have organizations that always come out and they try to squash that, no matter how true it is or how much evidence you have. Satanic ritual abuse is is an avenue of research that's unlike any other, and that no matter how much credibility you have, no matter how much evidence, you always have this extension of some organization that comes out and tries to squash it. And what we decided very quickly was we were not interested, and we did not believe we were called to make a film for skeptics, right? We felt we were called to make a film for people God was reaching out to open the eyes of Christians that would understand what it was and then get them motivated to pray about this topic. Because Tom and I are firmly convinced that unless God moves in the lives of the real church, that none of this is going to be exposed. I do not believe law enforcement or military has the capability of exposing this thing on a spiritual level, because this has a spiritual root. The church has to expose it through prayer, through fasting, through praying in, just like in Ezekiel 8 and other places in Scripture, where it took God actually revealing these satanic things that were happening in secret. And oftentimes, all of these things are happening in secret. They require the Holy Spirit moving in and revealing them. And so that is essentially what we settled on, and what we felt our calling was just to make a film that was a screaming wake-up call to the body of Christ, and not necessarily a film for skeptics. But that is the number one conversation that I have with people that would like to see the subject improved upon, is doing a film specifically in that style, exposing those stories from every angle, trying to gather as much evidence as possible. And Tom and I have actually been working on the idea of another film. I'll tell you in private, but we don't like to give all of our cards away, before we start engaging these projects, because that can be dangerous. But it would be much more along the lines of what you're talking about, and that's something that is on that we would love to do if the Lord opened up the doors and would allow us to do. It would just take a lot more money and a lot more time, and but we're excited at the prospect of maybe being able to do it.
Yeah. Also, I want to mention I did interview Dale Griffis, who was a world-renowned occult crimes investigator, who's just he used to be one of the number one guys in the country. People would call him to go out, and investigate and get his opinion. They would bring him in to be an expert witness in court cases. So he did get interviewed in the film, but I cut him out, and that was a hard decision to cut him out. But I had to do something because the film was over 2 hours long, and I thought, man, if I get people to hang in there this long, I'm going to be doing. I wasn't making the film for like hardcore fans, like people that love this stuff. I made. There's actually a bonus DVD that you can buy if you go to detestablefilm.com or go to throughtheblack.com. You can get there through that. And there's a bonus DVD of 2 hours of extra footage for all the hardcore fans of this stuff that really like to research, with even more footage. I have even more than that I didn't release, but I didn't want to release 5 DVDs of extra footage. I just got the best stuff. And there's a little bit of the interview with Dale, the law enforcement officer, on that extra DVD.
Well, and here's a story we haven't really told ever before.
Hold on, we're actually running out of time, guys. We got a few minutes left. Jared, let me direct this at you. Why are the fallen ones driving people to do detestable things to one another?
Man, because their entire mission in life is to 180 degrees flip what God has established. And you see it all the way back in Enoch when the Watchers descended on Mount Hermon and began to teach men detestable things. That is what they do. They take holy things and they profane them in this war against God. And we are casualties in a battle that we don't fully comprehend, and they care nothing about us. And they're jealous of the relationship and the potential relationships that we can have with God Almighty. And in this warfare, we are nothing but cattle to them. And that is why it is so important to push back with all of the tools that God has given us to perpetuate the holiness of God, to praise Him, and wage war against the ones that rebel against Him. And what we see being done, these abominations that happen in secret, make no mistake about it, they are a direct rebellion against God Almighty.
Amen. Well, guys, thank you so much for talking with me tonight. I really hope we can get together again here pretty soon, because I want to go into some more details about how do we help people who have been abused in these ways? How do we identify occult activity? How do we approach the leaders of our congregations about this topic? All that stuff deserves its own show, I think. So hopefully you guys can come back on.
Sure, man. Anytime.
Would love to. Love to.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Until next time, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Watchman out.